He claimed to have unalived over 200 people and showed no remorse while saying it. Richard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, wasn't your average criminal. He was a family man by day and allegedly a contract killer by night. But the question that still haunts investigators, psychologists, and true crime fans alike is this: how much of it was true? Was Kuklinski really one of the most dangerous criminals in American history, or just a master manipulator who spun a story dark enough to become legend? Welcome to Whispers of the Taken, where every mystery is a voice lost in the shadows. This video is based on public information and falls under fair use. Like, subscribe, and comment. Even the quietest voice can echo the loudest truth.
I would move heaven, hell, and anything in between to get to you. You wouldn't be safe anywhere if I was mad at you. And that's not bull, Dip, that's truth. I've went up against people. You could pull a gun on me, and if I'm mad at you, I'm coming forward.
The Iceman's illusion. Could Richard Kuklinski really have unalived 200 people? Seeds of violence. Richard Leonard Kuklinski's life began in darkness, born on April 11, 1935, in Jersey City, New Jersey. His home was not a sanctuary, but a breeding ground for pain. Raised by an abusive father, Stanley Kuklinski, and a deeply religious yet equally violent mother, Anna, Richard's early years were saturated in emotional and physical trauma. Stanley was a violent alcoholic who beat Richard regularly. Anna, perhaps more sinister in her devotion, believed that discipline through violence was an act of love. Together, they created a toxic environment that turned Richard into a hardened and emotionally disconnected child. He wasn't the only one to suffer. One of his brothers, Florian, was reportedly unalived by their father during a drunken beating, an incident that, though hushed up, left a permanent scar on the family. Richard later claimed that he felt no sadness over his brother's loss, only confusion. The ability to detach from death at such a young age foreshadowed what he would later become, or at least what he claimed to be. Richard found solace not in friendship or school, but in the streets. He dropped out early, roaming the neighborhoods and immersing himself in petty crime, pool halls, and shady deals. He began developing a reputation for being cold and dangerous. As a teenager, he allegedly unalived a neighborhood bully using a metal rod, then disposed of the body in a river. There were no police reports to confirm this, of course, just Richard's word. But is that enough? The making of a monster? The story Richard told the world was one of a descent into darkness, a man who graduated from street fights and petty thefts to becoming one of the most feared contract unalivers in the United States. According to Kuklinski, he began working with organized crime in the 1950s, first duplicating and distributing pornography, then moving into more sinister work. He said that the mob noticed him not for his charm or connections, but for his ruthlessness. He had no hesitation, no remorse, and no fear. They could give him a name, and the person would simply disappear. No questions, no failures. Kuklinski claimed ties to the Gambino and De Cavalcante crime families but was never made because of his Polish heritage. Still, he insisted he did their dirty work. Cyanide-laced food, poisoned drinks, explosives, garrotes, and even crossbows were tools of the trade, according to him. He claimed to have driven to random towns and unalived homeless individuals just to try things out. These confessions, delivered in a calm, flat tone during interviews from prison, shocked audiences. Here was a man speaking about unaliving humans as if he were reviewing a grocery list. Yet for all the horror in his tales, questions linger. No physical evidence supports many of these stories. Law enforcement linked him definitively to 5 victims. 5. How does one leap from 5 to 200? Fact versus fantasy. The victims Kuklinski was convicted of unaliving were real. Their families grieved and the loss was genuine. But many of his other stories exist only in his own words. Take, for instance, his tale of feeding a cyanide-laced hamburger to a man in a park. He claimed to have watched the man collapse and then calmly walked away. There was no police report, no body was found, no missing person matching that description. Nothing but the story of a man who already had the world's attention. Law enforcement officers who interviewed and investigated Kuklinski have long been split into two camps. Some believe he was every bit the monster he described. Others see a manipulator, a man who discovered that spinning a tale of blood and ice earned him notoriety. To the latter, Kuklinski's interviews weren't confessions, they were performances. Chilling, yes, but real? That remains up for debate. One must consider the psychology. A man stripped of his freedom for life might crave something else, control over how he's remembered, to be feared, to be known. The signature methods. Kuklinski's nickname, the Iceman, was rooted in his alleged strategy of freezing victims to obscure the time of death. He supposedly kept bodies in industrial freezers for days, even months, then dumped them in public places, throwing off investigators. According to one detective, this method was confirmed in only one case, and even that had questionable links to Kuklinski. Nevertheless, the nickname stuck, and with it came an aura of unstoppable calculation. He portrayed himself as a professional, someone who could blend into the suburbs as a loving father while unaliving people on the side. His methods, if taken at face value, included cyanide sprays, nasal ingestion, poisoned steaks, and even remote-controlled car bombs. He claimed to once light a man on fire inside a car and walk away before the flames erupted. But where are the witnesses? Where are the other charges? Where are the families of the other 195 alleged victims? Most true crime experts agree that people who unalive often leave behind trails, sloppy moments, evidence, connections. But Kuklinski, according to himself, left none for over 4 decades. That in itself seems almost too perfect, too clean. A double life. Perhaps the most haunting part of Kuklinski's story is his home life. He was a husband to Barbara Kuklinski and father to 3 children. He brought home gifts, helped with school, and attended family events. Barbara later admitted that he had a temper and he was at times abusive, but she never suspected he was unaliving people for money. To his children, he was simply Dad. This contradiction is at the heart of the Kuklinski legend. Was he a hidden monster, capable of separating himself so fully from his crimes that he could play with his kids hours after ending someone's life? Or was he a deeply broken man, feeding the world stories as twisted as the ones he was told growing up? Barbara eventually divorced him while he was in prison, citing psychological manipulation and fear. She said she no longer knew what parts of their life were real. That confusion reflects what many feel about his story. The sting and the cell. In 1986, after a 17-month undercover operation, Kuklinski was arrested. The operation involved ATF agent Dominic Polifrone, who posed as a fellow hitman. Polifrone gained Kuklinski's trust and recorded damning conversations, including Kuklinski agreeing to unalive someone using cyanide. That arrest led to multiple charges and convictions. The state only pursued a handful of cases, those they could prove beyond doubt. Kuklinski was sentenced to consecutive life terms. He would never see freedom again. And that's when the interviews began. Kuklinski opened up to journalists, criminologists, and documentarians. He spoke of mafia hits, random acts of violence, even unaliving a man in front of his own daughter. He recounted being trained by mob figures like Roy DeMeo and performing executions in alleyways, highways, and diners. But once again, the question arises, where is the proof? The more outrageous the claim, the fewer the facts. Death and doubt. Richard Kuklinski died in March 2006 at the age of 70. Official reports listed natural causes, but his wife claimed he was possibly poisoned to prevent him from testifying against a former mob associate. The prison declined an autopsy, citing the family's wishes. To some, his death sealed his legacy. To others, it left a trail of questions that will never be answered. Was he a sociopathic mastermind who slipped through the cracks of law enforcement for decades, or a fraud whose real crimes were terrifying but far fewer than he claimed? Even the FBI has noted that Kuklinski may have been a confabulator, a person who fills memory gaps with fabrication. He may have believed his stories over time, or he may have simply known the world craves monsters and gave them what they wanted. Legacy of lies or truth? The story of Richard Kuklinski endures because it sits at the crossroads of horror and doubt. On one hand, he was undeniably capable of great violence. The 5 confirmed unalivings were brutal and senseless. But on the other hand, many of his most horrific confessions stand on shaky ground, without evidence, context, or corroboration. Could one man really unalive over 200 people and leave barely a trace? Or did he unalive a few and then build a house of horrors inside his own mind, brick by brick, lie by lie? We may never know the full truth, but that's what makes his story so chilling. Not just the crimes he committed, but the terrifying possibility that even in death, Richard Kuklinski is still controlling the narrative, still playing the part of the Iceman, still making us wonder how much of it was real.